Welcome. I'm Mayor Gary Sulz, and with me today is Dave Mohn, Training Officer and Emergency Program Coordinator with Revelstoke Fire Rescue Services. Today, Dave and I are talking about how to prepare for an emergency and, importantly, how the city of Revelstoke is prepared for emergencies. So first off, Dave, can you tell me about your role as Emergency Program Coordinator?
Yep, sure. So cities, towns, regional districts, they're responsible for their own emergency response. And so they have to look after themselves in their own area of jurisdiction. And so that local authority is able to appoint a coordinator to help facilitate the program. And so that's why we have an EPC, my role. Right. And so I'm here to help the city's emergency preparedness, response, and recovery program. So a couple things that I might do is review and update plans. So last year we updated the hazard, risk, and vulnerability analysis plan. And this year we're currently updating the emergency response plan. There's training and exercises. So with the training, we had staff sit through the EOC Essentials training this year. So when something happens, that just allows people who are already knowledgeable and know the procedures and what forms to fill out to go in and fill the EOC. We're also doing a push to get a lot of the city staff trained in incident command system. So if there is an incident, they know the terminology and they know the organizational structure that we use in an emergency. And then there's just liaisoning with different stakeholders. So that's where you sit in with your committees and your meetings and talk to different external agencies, see what they're doing, and then make decisions about where the program's headed.
And so when we're talking about an EOC, we're talking Emergency Operations Center. That's kind of the acronym. Yeah. And that's basically where you and staff or whoever is going to be working in that center to deal with problems that are already at risk or that we're involved with, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So really when we talk about emergency preparedness, we have organizations that assist you with that. So if we had something that what we're seeing in the Shuswap or in Kelowna, we have the emergency support services here in Revelstoke. So Brenda Jones and her organization will kind of help with that. And we can get into what they do a little later. But also you've got a team behind you. And then we have the CSRD as well that are there to assist if you need anything. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the city looks after themselves. So we have trained staff. We'll fill the EOC. It's not just Revelstoke. We do look after the CSRD Area B. And right. So they're very good to deal with. So yeah, we can rely on them as well. They'll come and help out. They've been over here several occasions. The way it's set up, we have a regional emergency center in Nelson. And so that's a resource that we can deal with. And then provincially, they have an emergency communication center that we can rely on as well.
Right. So it's not Revelstoke alone. We're in this as a group.
No, it's a tiered system. There's a lot of help out there.
Okay, good. All right. So Dave, what can we do to prepare ourselves or our homes in case of an emergency?
The importance of personal preparedness really can't be overstated. People should be prepared for themselves. In case an emergency happens, people could be panicked. We may not have time. People might not be thinking clearly. So if you can prepare yourself ahead of time, so much the better. So really every resident, every home, every business should have their own emergency plan. And that should be written down so anybody that's involved with that plan knows about it. So you're just going to have information about, so if it's for a house, your family members, your pets. It would include something on a smaller scale. So if you have to escape your home, what is the escape route? Once you get out, where are you going to meet? Is it going to be at the neighbor's place? If it's a larger scale, maybe not everybody's at home. Are your kids in school? Are your spouses working opposite ends of town, out of town? So you want to know, also have a spot like somewhere else in the neighborhood. Or not neighborhood, out of the neighborhood.
Right.
Maybe it's the whole city and you have to leave the city. Do you have family, friends out of town where you can go and get support? What's their contact information? Can you get all that? It's good to have some of your important documentation. Where's your insurance? Where's all your health care needs? And have all that written down. So that would be roughly what the emergency plan is. A supply kit is a good idea. So you may not be evacuated. You might have to shelter in place for a few days. So do you have food? Do you have water? Do you have the supplies needed if you can't leave your house? Maybe there's no electricity. So do you have flashlights? Do you have radio? Do you have extra batteries? Do you have a charger for your phone? That kind of thing. Right. Maybe a little bit of cash, maybe first aid kit, something like that. If you do get evacuated, it's always good to have a grab and go bag. And so it's a smaller bag, a duffel bag, backpack. Won't have as many supplies, but it has the same stuff inside of that. And you'll also want to consider things like medication, toiletries, and again, like your insurance papers and things like that. Another thing to be aware of is just knowing the hazards. And so what I mean by knowing the hazards is what hazards are out there that could affect you. So what I think about this year specifically is wildfires and extreme heat.
Right.
So if I know what to do before those things happen, obviously that's where the preparedness comes in. I know you had Lauren Marfleet on talking about wildfire. So she explained what you can do for your home and do for extreme heat. Like, what are the tips and tricks that you can do to keep cool? How can you keep your home cool? Whether that's like, do you have a fan? Is air conditioning even an option? Opening your windows at night. There's different things that you can do, and knowing that ahead of time is better. Where's the coolest place in your building or in your home? Is there cooling centers in the neighborhood? So there's just different things that you can do to know your hazards.
And that's something that, here in Revelstoke, we've, especially in the last year or two, we've been trying to get that information out. We have our facilities open, so the community center, the library, the senior center, those places are there. They're able to keep people cool if people want them.
Yep.
Right? That's there for them. And then, we've been talking about grab and go bags and things that should be in that sort of thing. So there is a website for looking at that sort of stuff. So not everybody has access to a computer to look at that. So I think as we move forward, that information will go out to those areas of the community where people are more inclined due to their age, whether it's younger or older, to say, hey, what do we need? And we'll be able to give those lists out, that sort of thing. And I think we have access to that sort of stuff through our emergency support services to help people with that. So.
Yep. Emergency support services. One thing that you mentioned that I'll just touch on is a lot of this information can be located online. Like you say, Prepared BC is an excellent site. They've got all the guides. Normally, we'll keep hard copies of those guides at the fire station.
Right.
And so if people don't have access to online and they don't want to do it themselves, they can come down, they can pick up a copy.
Well, that's
We've been handing a fair bit out, so I've got more on order right now, but yeah.
Oh, that's good. And it's great that there's an interest. Well, I mean, I'm getting emails on a very regular basis as to how are we prepared, that sort of thing. And, so there is that ability to get the information out. We'll get that out, but definitely if people want physically to come to the fire hall for that sort of thing, or anyone in basically in your group, in the emergency preparedness group, could sit down with them if the need be to go over that.
Yeah, and it's not just creating an emergency plan or putting your supply kits together. There's also hazard specific. So you can pull one up on flooding. You can pick one up on wildfire, on heat. And then there's some more general ones. So it's not just for your home. There's if you have disabilities, what to do if you have pets, if you're in an apartment or a condo building. So there's a lot of material there.
Yeah. And we see things like I've seen on doors of homes where people have got 2 dogs in the home, so that
we have one too.
Yeah, so that you show up at the door and okay, we've got 2 animals in here, so we're going to be looking for those animals as well if we need to get people out safely. So those are the things. So when would the city activate its emergency operations center, and what role does the EOC play in that emergency?
So normally when an emergency happens, it tends to be smaller scale, like it's not catastrophic. So on a smaller scale, we have first responders or we have workers who are trained to deal with the situation. If the event is larger or more complex than their resources can handle, we'll initiate an EOC to support the site. Also, if there's a threat to people, property, environment, or if there's a potential for a threat to those things, then we'd be considering opening an EOC. And so once it's opened, the role of the EOC is to support the incident. And so they're going to organize and coordinate a response. And so there's a lot of information to collect, a lot of data to analyze, and out of that they'll come up with an action plan and set goals. And And then there's resource acquisition. Do we need more people? Do we need equipment? Do we need iron out there? Do we need transportation? Do we have to come up with an evacuation? So EOC will look after all that. What's been impacted? Have the people been impacted, the population? Are there buildings damaged, critical infrastructure? So they'll look at the best way to deal with that and look into recovery for that as well. And then finances, you got to pay bills and you got to track costs. So finance is part of the EOC. And then communication is a big one. We have an information officer who will put information out to the community to keep them informed of what's going on.
Okay, so here in Revelstoke, we have two physical places that we operate what we call an EOC. So we've got one at the airport, and that's our main one. It's specifically designed to be at the airport, so it's kind of out of the downtown community. It's nearby services that we can get, like airplanes coming in, that sort of thing. Yep. But then we have a secondary at the fire training center. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. So the one out of at the airport, you can just walk in, sit down, turn on the computers, and start going.
Right.
The one down at the training center, you would have to bring some
equipment
of your equipment in, but we do have it's laid out that it is a secondary backup EOC.
Yeah. And then we have our emergency support services here in town. Now they're based out of the search and rescue office at the police station.
Yep.
The back part of the police station, and they're there to do what we call that support. And that support basically is once a disaster or something has been defined, they're there to help. So recently, Brenda and her crew are helping the EOC out of Salmon Arm by housing some of those people who were evacuated out of that area here in our community, making sure that they had the funds that they needed to be put up, food, that sort of thing. And basically they look after those things on behalf of your emergency plan. And so we know that they're there, and the community needs to know that definitely we have people in place to look after them should the need arise, with backup support, as you mentioned, through the CSRD and other ways of going about it. So it's not that everyone's left on their own, or not that it appears that, oh my God, we don't have anything planned. There is a plan, but plans change depending on the circumstances or the disaster that we're dealing with, whether that be wildfire or flood or landslide or heat or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
You guys have a tentative plan for that, and that plan will morph depending on what the situation is. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. With ESS, one thing I find about ESS is when I talk to people about it, a lot of people aren't aware of it, or they don't know what they do. And,
yes.
And I think really everybody should. And you touched on it, but if you're displaced from your home because of a disaster, ESS will step up and provide the basic needs. So they'll give you food, lodging, accommodations, travel, incidentals. And it's usually for a 3-day period just to get you on your feet and give you time to think about what your next steps are. And then when it's a larger event, like you mentioned with the evacuations with the wildfire, well, now you need a whole community that needs that support. So then they'll set up a reception center, maybe they set up group lodging, and it's ESS, which is predominantly volunteers.
Yes, it is.
It's a provincial volunteer organization. And so they're doing the reception centers, they're doing the group lodging, and really helping out with the people side of the evacuation. And you mentioned Brenda Jones. Shout out to Brenda Jones. She's our emergency services director. She does a phenomenal job. And we have a small group of people, but thanks to them as well. Some people, when a disaster hits, they want to volunteer. So it's like, what can I do? With ESS, the way it's been going, you need a little bit of training. Yes. It's not difficult training, but you need to know a few things. And then we've also gone to an electronic registration system. So you have to be familiar with that software and how to help those people. So it's very difficult to take people off the street and say, yes, we can use you, we'll put you to use. We really need the volunteers to step up and come in and get trained beforehand.
And that's really important. So I had a conversation with Brenda on the weekend, and there's 4 online courses that are free to take that will get people up and running if they want to go a little further with ESS and join her group and go from there. She's willing to give that information out and go from there. I know that I looked after emergency support services for years ago. Things have changed for the better now, where that electronic registration really is imperative. It's quick, it helps people. It definitely helps get the numbers of people through. So years ago, Chrissy and I were in the reception center in Kamloops, and to be able to sit across from people and help them is an awesome thing. So if people are interested in getting involved, just encourage them to get a hold of you or get a hold of Brenda, and then go from there. And I don't have Brenda's phone number right off the top of my head, but there's ways of getting in touch, and even send me an email and we'll get the information.
Yeah, one thing about that, if I can, is we talk about the electronic system and computers and everything, and people are like, well, I can't do that because I'm not computer savvy. You don't need to be. There's other places that they can put you to work. And then with the ERA system, the electronic registration, you mentioned sitting across face to face. Well, what Brenda and her group have been doing is working with Kathy Semchuk over with ESS over in Salmon Arm and the fire complex that's happening there. And they're able to log in here and extend evacuees benefits further on. So they're doing a lot of work for places outside of our area.
Yeah, thanks for that information. I appreciate that, because really they are assisting. It looks like oh, nothing's happening in our community. Yes, we've put people up in our community, but as you say, Brenda and her group of volunteers have been helping what Kathy needs down there. So that's great. So how can people find more resources on emergency preparedness? Now, you've said a lot. We're talking about Prepared BC and other websites. Is there anything else that we should note for people, Dave?
Oh, as far as resources, yeah, Prepared BC, I would start there. There are a lot of guides, a lot of good information. There are federal ones as well. Get Prepared is a federal site. Emergency Management and Climate Readiness. They have good information on there. A lot of it is linked to Prepared BC, but they also have some stuff on evacuation information for people.
Good.
Fire Smart, and again, you talked about that before. That's a good one to do. As you start getting closer to an event and you want to keep an eye on weather, Environment Canada has some good things. They got some apps out there that are worth looking at. During the Emergency Info BC, BC Wildfire, they're good. All of that information, all of that information is linked on our city website at revelstoke.ca. It might be a little difficult to find, but under City Services, there is an emergency management site or section, and then there's a resource tab underneath that.
Okay, good.
The one other thing that was pointed out is that what people can do to be prepared is we have implemented an alertable system, and it's a mass notification system. So we can push information out to those who sign up for it, and it's just a very handy way to get information. You can get it on your computer, by text, cell phone, regular phone. If you don't have that technology, there's a bunch of ways that you can get that information.
Yeah, and that's basically, you know, if you're looking, I don't know whether it's on in the App Store, but it's called Alertable.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, interesting talking with some people the other day going like, if you get a notification on your landline phone, there is a strange sound that comes through, and then the notice comes through.
Yeah, one thing with Alertable is it's not intrusive. So Alert Ready is the one that pushes it out. So like RCMP uses it for their Amber Alerts.
Okay.
So you're getting that whether you want it or not. Alertable isn't like that. You actually have to sign up.
Yeah.
And you can set it up by area, so it can just be the Revelstoke area that you're interested in. But then if you go traveling, you can get the alerts whatever area you're traveling, which I think is a good feature.
Oh, it's an awesome way of doing it. Yeah, that's good. Good. All right, Dave, thanks so much for speaking with me today, and really discussing emergencies is an important thing, so I appreciate that. Emergencies can be very fluid situations which require flexible and responsive actions. I'm confident that the city has a plan in place along with the right people and the right processes to confidently manage any emergency situation that we may have to confront. So again, I want to thank our audience for listening in. Be sure to take a few minutes to watch our latest videos on the City Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram accounts. Thanks again, Dave. Appreciate you being here. Thanks.